It is 9:01, so we'll get started, and I think people will keep joining as we go on, but that's okay. So thank you everybody for being here today. This is our second Women's SBR Coffee Corner, so we're really excited to be hosting this again. The last one went really well, and it was a lot of fun for us, and so we're so excited to do this again. Really quick, before I introduce our speakers today, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. So the way we run these, it's very informal. We like interaction, and so if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or even raise your hand. We want this to be interactive. And then just a little bit of background really quick about us, in case you're unfamiliar with our program. So and my name is Dana Catron. I'm the program director for the New Mexico FAST program at Arrowhead Center. And we provide free SBIR and STTR proposal development support to small businesses throughout New Mexico. But we also hold events like these, and we have resources and other things, YouTube videos that are available to anybody, regardless of where you're at. So lots of resources if you are wanting to pursue a SBIR or STTR proposal. So with that, thank you again for joining us today, and I'd like to introduce our speakers really quick, and then they can tell you a little bit more about themselves. But first, we've got Miss Brittany Sickler, and Brittany is here today from the Small Business Administration, and we're so excited to have you here, Brittany, because you're so involved with the SBIR programs, and you're really, I was trying to remember how long we've been working together. It's been quite a few years now, but
I think since the beginning of 2017. So yeah.
but yeah, so maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about your role at SBA and your role with the SBIR and STTR programs, that'd be great.
Sure. No, Dana, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you over the years, and I think though we've only been in person together maybe a handful of times, but no, everyone, I'm excited to be with you all today. So thanks again, Dana, for the invite. I'm with an office at SBA, the Office of Innovation and Technology. That's this coordinating hub across the programs, across SBIR and STTR. And we're a small team, and we're a bit in a corner in a sense at the agency. I'm sure many of you know of different parts of SBA and partners, particularly this last year, obviously, with a lot of the assistance going out to small businesses. But our team, we cover a wide variety of areas in the SBIR realm. So some of my colleagues focus on kind of the underlying policy, data, everything that's housed on SBIR.gov. We work really closely with those agencies, kind of on their processes, on their outreach. So we have done the SBIR Road Tour for many years, of which we were in New Mexico, luckily, back in 2019. As last year, we did not get out on the bus. But my role, I work primarily with organizations and people who are supporting entrepreneurs through the process. So whether they're potential SBIR applicants or awardees, it's a challenging world wherever you are, whatever kind of technology you're working on. And so with many of those partners, we do dive deeper in trying to figure out ways that we can improve access to assistance. So we do run a couple funding opportunities for those organizations. We don't have any of our own SBIR funding or any funding for companies working on R&D. And so I don't want to go too far in the intro, but I think I'm particularly interested in the topic of women's involvement in SBIR. We worked with the National Women's Business Council last year on a study that was released kind of the end of August, and looking across the agencies at a kind of a more on the data side, also working with partners like Dana, trying to figure out where there are, promising kind of pathways, what's really working well, where there's challenges, and trying to get down into the nuance to see if we can kind of improve the representation of women, both as owners of companies that are being funded with SBIR, STTR, principal investigators, and just have a much stronger and kind of richer scene across the programs and across, U.S. innovation. So I'm happy here today to chat, especially informally. It's a little later in DC, but I still brought some coffee.
Coffee. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brittany. Our second speaker is Miss Cindy Lineman, and we're so happy to have just wrapped up a proposal with her. So we're excited to hear how that goes. But Cindy is the owner and founder of Upcycle Power LLC. So Cindy, do you want to talk a little bit maybe about what you're doing with your company and your technology, and really what inspired you to apply for SBIR? Because it really was pretty new to you right before Energy Sprint and kind of your introduction with that. So if you could give a little bit of an introduction, that would be great.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for inviting me to be here this morning. It's always fun to be able to talk about this project that I am just really excited about. So yes, I'm like brand spanking new to entrepreneurship. I got my PhD in physics 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And since then have worked in the policy space really around energy storage and energy affordability issues. And during that time, I had this idea percolating. So I'd heard this fact that when an electric vehicle battery is pulled out of the vehicle at the end of its life, it still has 80% of its capacity left in it. And it just, I don't know, it like stuck with me. And so, on and off, I would think about this idea. Well, what could it look like? Could you put them in Connex boxes? Could you have them be modular? Could you ship them out to rural places because they're more affordable? And I've spent a lot of my career working on, energy affordability in rural places and also really remote places, both domestically and internationally. And so it kind of, so, like working on these sort of issues from the policy side, I really understand the policy side well. So I worked on them in the US Senate. I worked at the State Department, where we really were focusing on like, how do we get transformative technologies like energy storage out to places that are hard to get to and that maybe don't have the tax base necessarily to support them. And so I just kind of kept thinking about it. And then when COVID happened, something kind of clicked for me. I had both way more and way less time. So I have a toddler, and so like on the one side, I had way less time. I have like a baby, and she runs around all the time, and they never stop moving. But I don't know. I wasn't talking to people as much. I wasn't interacting with people at work, and I thought, if I'm going to be stuck at home for a while, I might as well figure out like, is this the time to do this thing that I've been thinking about? And I just felt compelled to do it, even though I have no background in business. My mom was a small business owner, and so I worked at her business when I was growing up, and so I had like that sort of picture. And I loved that, and I loved that experience. But I don't know anything about business. I've never been to business school, and so I just started kind of thinking about the problem from the technology side, and then looking for resources. And I'm so lucky that I live in New Mexico, where there are so many resources available to me. And it just happened that Arrowhead Center was starting this energy sprint. And I kind of done I had started with a couple of other accelerators, and they were all very focused on website-based businesses. And I think that the value that I found from the energy sprint was because it was all energy businesses, we just had a lot in common. And we were energy businesses, like there were legitimate businesses selling things that were part of the energy sprint. And then there was me, and I had this idea 2 months before. But just kind of seeing where people had gone was really informative to me. And we learned about SBIR and STTR as part of that process. And the other thing that we learned a lot about was just the customer engagement process. And so how important it is to start going out and doing customer interviews. And so as part of an energy sprint, I did, I think, probably 20 interviews both with customers, but also just with people that I wanted to be my mentor. So I would just go and kind of cold email people and say, hey, can I talk to you about this thing? And people are incredibly generous with their time, I found. They really want to help people in the entrepreneurship space. And I'm always a little bit intimidated to just cold email people, but no one's ever been mean to me in response. So yeah, when I finished the energy sprint, I decided to apply for an NSF STTR grant. I decided on NSF because we had done so much of this customer development, and I know as NSF really prizes that piece from kind of talking to Dana and Del at New Mexico Fast. And we went with STTR because we found through the energy sprint some really great research partners at NMSU who are going to do kind of the research part of the project, because I live in a house and don't have a lab, and my house is my business now. So we're really excited to have that incredible technical expertise be part of the project. And I feel like I've talked for a while, so I'll maybe turn it back over to Dana, and then of course, obviously happy to answer questions as we go along.
Sure, and we'll delve into kind of how you felt during that process too. I want to introduce one more guest speaker. I'm going to put you on the spot, Patricia, but I think we can get a lot of insight also from Patricia Knighton, who is our NMSU's new IP and technology transfer director here at Arrowhead Center. So we're so excited to have you on board. And Patricia has lots of experience with the entire SBIR process, especially on the DoD side. And so she's got some unique perspectives. So Patricia, do you want to do a really quick introduction, just maybe on your SBIR experience, and feel free to jump in wherever you'd like as we're talking.
Awesome. I just figured out how to turn my mute off, so I'm really high tech. Yeah. Good morning, ladies. I thank you, Dana, so much. My name's Patricia Knighton. I did join Arrowhead in January, and my position in innovation, commercialization, and intellectual property management is really all about converting all the great research into useful products, services, anything the society can adopt, and bring the benefits of R&D into the culture. And we do that various ways. And so SBIRs, of course, are a key part of research. And I'm a big advocate supporting women as well. So thank you, Dana, and I'll look forward to the discussion. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Patricia. Okay, so now we'll jump into the discussion, and we really designed this discussion based around the questions everybody asked during the registration. So thank you so much for providing that input. It really helps us frame how we move this along. And if your question isn't addressed today, please know that there were a lot. And so feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'd be happy to have a longer discussion with you too about some of these, because there were some really great questions. But I think one of the ones that really kind of comes up a lot, and we saw this a lot with the registration questions, is SBIR is pretty intimidating when you're first coming at it. So Sydney, I'm going to put you on the spot because it's still fresh in your brain, but can you elaborate a little bit more about what your experience was like and some of the challenges you faced putting together your first proposal? Because it was pretty new, right? And there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. And so what was that like, and how did you kind of navigate that?
Sure. So the first piece that I did was a pitch proposal for NSF. So it's just a 2-pager, and it went really well. And I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty easy. And it got accepted, and I was really excited. And then I had to write the full proposal, and that was hard. So I think there were a couple of things. The first thing was I was brand new to this grant writing process. And so when I first talked to Dana and Del, they said, oh, it'll take 100 hours. And I said, oh, I can probably get that done in a month, in between like having a full-time job and a baby and like a family and obligations. And I was crazy. So I think kind of my first tip that I would have is just give yourself a lot of time. I thought I was going to get it done for the December deadline. I ended up working right up into the March deadline. And I think maybe other women entrepreneurs feel this way, that we just feel like we have to do everything. And so just know that they're going to review again in 3 months. And so giving yourself the space to put together the thing you want, because for me, I think part of it too was because I was a brand new business. It really made me ask myself questions that I hadn't thought about before about the market. What was the market? How was the technology going to work? How was I going to answer the questions along the way for the next 2-5 years, to think about where is this technology going, and really dig into who the customer is. So that's kind of my first tip, is just give yourself a lot of time. The other issue that I tend to struggle with is I'm going to say I'm a perfectionist, and not like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. Like, no, I'm a perfectionist, and it makes me not be able to do work sometimes, and it's not good. So I get intimidated, and I think if I can't write down the right thing, then I can't write it down. And so I think one of the tools that New Mexico Fast provided was, just a template, a breakdown of what you need to answer. And so I would say, okay, I'm going to answer 3 questions. I'm just going to write something down, and it's not going to be perfect. But I'm just going to get something on the paper, and I'm not going to think about, well, how do I describe the market, all 10 pages of that discussion. I'm just going to think about, okay, how do I answer this one little question? And so breaking it down into chunks like that really, really helped a lot to just like think about how I'm going to answer one question today, and take a step back from the larger piece. I was also very lucky in that I had these research partners from NMSU that I had met through Energy Sprint. And I think one of the challenges that I've had in grant development, and then, in other projects in life, is sometimes you need things from people, but they're really busy and they don't work for you. And so, you have to figure out how to balance being pushy with being nice, because you want to work with these people, you want to have a good relationship with them. And so, just figuring out that, and being kind of understanding and patient with people to know that they have a lot of responsibilities too. So I manage that by being really clear about what I need, a lot of bulleted emails saying like, I need these 3 things and I need them by this date, and keeping myself really sort of organized in that way. I'm a big spreadsheet person. I make a lot of spreadsheets. So there was a lot of spreadsheets going on, and New Mexico Fast provided a lot of kind of compliance matrices as well, which I found really helpful. And then I guess to go back to my first point about giving yourself a lot of time, my understanding is that letters of support are really important. So starting to email people and getting those lined up early, and then drafting them and sending them to the people so that they can then make their changes and send them back to you. Because, like, again, everyone is really busy. And so you want to make it as easy as possible. And then I had so many people read it. I had the folks from New Mexico Fast read it. I had some of my mentors read it. I had my family read it. And just to make sure that it made sense. And part of it too is that I've gotten a lot better, but like I started off as a scientist. And so I used to write like a scientist, and that is not great. That is not ideal all the time. And so New Mexico Fast had this great video about, create a narrative, create a story, make this something that's interesting for the reviewers to read. And so that was really helpful in me thinking about like, okay, how would I tell this story to someone that that doesn't know anything about material science or machine learning or whatever. And so I found that to be really, really helpful in thinking through that process. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Sydney. Eileen, I hate to put you on the spot, but if you want to introduce yourself.
I figured that was going to happen.
Eileen, we spotted you.
You can't sneak in. But feel free to jump in the discussion. There's actually some questions here that your perspective would be really great on. And everybody, this is Eileen Chan. She's from the DOE's SBIR program. And Eileen, do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm new to the DOE. I've been here for 4 months. I was in the private sector for 25 years. So I am new and the outreach program manager in the DOE SBIR STTR programs office of program SBIR. I'm saying it wrong, but in the programs office there. And so I'm really like on a steep learning curve. I'm very much enjoying my new job, learning about this vast ecosystem, and I love hearing these stories. Sydney, I loved your story. And I'm just, I'm attending these webinars to kind of glean my outreach strategy and, figure out really what's going to work. And I'm also available for any questions that people have during this coffee hour. So thank you.
Great.
If I can add, sorry, real quick, Dana, because it's been great getting to know Eileen the last few months, but I also wanted to say Eileen's not new though to the SBIR realm, has been involved with companies applying for funding, and so has, I would say, a more unique perspective than some of the other folks. I've never applied for SBIR, so I did want to highlight that.
Thank you. And I will say I didn't work for large corporations throughout my career. I always was working for a small business. I worked for a series of small businesses. I've worked for a fair number of startups and also consulting companies, but I know how difficult it is for a startup company to survive. I've seen the success stories and I've seen the companies that didn't make it. So I've seen a pretty wide variety of experiences out there, and I have an appreciation for how challenging it is.
So kind of on that end, between the two of you, Brittany and Eileen, kind of along the same lines of what I was asking Sydney from your end, so kind of on the opposite end, the agency end. And I know, Brittany, you've sat in a bus with program managers for hours and with all of the conferences. And so I know you've got lots of background knowledge on this. But what are some of the challenges and things that agencies commonly see as small businesses are trying to put together these proposal packages? Because I imagine there's phone calls and things like that, and there's questions and things. So could you speak to maybe some of the common areas that you guys see that small businesses have as they're putting together these proposal packages?
Sure. No, there's a lot we could talk through here. I'll just mention some, and then I would love Eileen to bring that up as well. But over the last few years, as I've gotten to know the agencies, I think, many of you who probably looked into SBIR have looked at the agencies almost like they're different people, right? So the way they approach their programs, it does vary quite a bit. The topic areas, kind of the base part of putting together a proposal, you're going to find similar in terms of trying to compete for that funding, but even being able to reach out, have connections, Sydney's experience having, reaching out to a program manager at NSF is very different if any of you have applied to, let's say, one of the DoD services and so forth. So, I mean, that right in that is a challenge. So if someone doesn't have a Dana or, the Arrowhead Center in their life, you can do a lot of searching online, but it still can be hard to figure out, how it applies to where you are, where you want to be, what those options are, how you're going to prioritize and move forward. And so that's something that, we're aware of and trying to work on in a variety of ways. But it's still, I think, going to be a challenge. Now, on the flip side, real quick, there's kind of an opportunity as well on the challenge in that, some of the agencies are going to be easier for some things and some won't. Some are providing, extra assistance in areas. So the fact that it's not all the same, I think we can at least, see some really good practices going forward and try to, shape the culture of SBIR. So, beyond what our partners are doing, several agencies are trying to address especially for new applicants, for targeted applicants. So, if you're familiar with NIH, their applicant assistance program, I know Eileen can go into some of what DOE has done, but specifically with women, through that study I mentioned, and I'll throw a link here in the chat, we noticed some really interesting trends and percentage changes at the agencies. So, NSF and DOE, I think in particular, were able to really increase the percentage of awards to women-owned companies. But overall, I mean, in those years, SBIR budget's been growing so much. It's over $4 billion a year now, combined SBIR TTR. And so I think in that we have actually, though, decreased percentage-wise slightly the number of awards to women. And so, we are trying to look at, okay, now there's challenges in accessing the information, just even finding out what's a fit. Sydney went into, even putting together your proposal, like how you're working on your technology, what are you doing for commercialization? There's so many pieces there. And so really trying to figure out what that lifeline is, what is this, kind of customer journey, us looking at applicants, and then applicants obviously doing their own customer journey for government and beyond. So I'll pause there and have Eileen fill in a little bit too.
So it, like Brittany says, every agency is very different. I can speak a little bit to the DOE process, which is complex. I'm not gonna whitewash it at all. I am gonna type in the URL for the DOE SBIR website. If you become interested in applying for a DOE SBIR STTR grant, please check out our funding opportunity pages right in July and in November. That's when our phase 1 releases come out. And then the topics are released, and DOE has mission-focused topics. So it's not like NSF. NSF has the pitch paper. That's not the way DOE works. We have a large number of very specific topics, and it's not necessarily in the areas that you think of. Certainly we have a number of topics in the renewable energy field, but we fund a lot of topics in basic energy sciences, such as instrumentation development, and then of course nuclear energy and nuclear non-proliferation as well. We do quantum information system topics as well too, and cybersecurity. So don't think of DOE as only energy, new energy technology development. So July and November are when our topics come out. I also just want to mention we have a number of application resources as well too, especially for first-time applicants. If you're new and you're applying for a DOE SBIR grant, please apply to our phase 0 application assistance program, in which you receive personal mentoring and coaching on the application process, because the application process is unfortunately complicated. If I could make it simpler, I would, but I'm not there yet. So I just wanted to let you know about those resources, and also we are very interested in receiving more applicants from women entrepreneurs, and we are really trying to reach out to women researchers and small businesses and let them know about the program. If anybody has any suggestions for me on organizations I could reach out to and talk to them and advertise our program and our application resources, I would love to hear from you.
Great, thank you, Eileen. And then really quick, Patricia, do you have any tips? I mean, you're coming at it from kind of the DoD side, which is a whole nother program, right? So they've got a different process too. Do you have any best practices or tips?
Well, one of the, and it occurred to me during the comments that were just made, one of the things in the SBIR program that I've always had a good leverage, so I've been in private industry and I've been on the applicant side as well before I joined Arrowhead. And the time to actually go talk to the topic owners, the period of time where you can actually have discussions about your technology and your needs, do the NIH and the NSF and the DOE do that as broadly as the DoD, or can any of you answer a little bit of that?
Eileen, do you want to?
Oh, yeah, well, so when the topics come out, as I said, the phase one topics come out in July and November. From that time on until the application is submitted, for
Oh.
example, November to February, you can reach out to the topic managers. Now, we encourage our applicants to reach out with questions and establish an email or set up a phone call. However, I just want to say that our program managers, the SBIR program, they're conducting research. They are they're managing programs within, like, the Office of Fossil Energy and the Office of Cybersecurity, et cetera. So their SBIR is a very small part of their job. Unfortunately, some of them are very communicative and others, unfortunately, less so, but you still should always try to reach out and hopefully you'll get a good conversation going.
Yeah, I guess that was kind of the idea, is that making that attempt to reach out. And some agencies are trying to really facilitate that. There's really nothing like talking to the actual technical point of contact, but some agencies are moving towards the Center of Excellence or the SBIR program office to help have those discussions and field some of the questions that you would have. So because it is so hard to talk to the TPOCs, we call them TPOCs in the DoD. Is that what you guys call them?
No, and I imagine it works differently in other agencies. I do get the impression that NSF maybe it's a little bit easier during the pitch process. And also
that can be easier.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Eileen.
No, that's fine.
But
go ahead, Brittany.
I was gonna say, for them, it depends too, right? I think on their bandwidth and their ability to respond. And like USDA, they have their national program leader. So there is some different terminology, and especially if it's a granting agency versus a contracting agency, there'll be some stipulations around that too.
I did also want to mention that as part of the phase one process, there is a letter of intent required. And so it's about 500 words. You submit it. If it's not a good fit, you will get an email that says it's not a good fit, and it will say why. And you can still submit an application. You should address the issues in the email that you receive. And so unfortunately, if you don't receive an email, it means that it's not non-responsive. I hate to say it that way, but you only receive an email if your letter of intent is non-responsive, but at least it's very helpful, and it will definitely keep you from getting involved in this very lengthy application process where it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's a great feature though, to actually get some insight from someone that says, this is kind of off, or if you address this, we're interested. That's great feedback. I think the more you have in the face of the customer's viewpoints, whatever agency, that's just good program management. You've got to know what they want and speak to what they want if it's in your bag, and then a quick no if it's not, right? We all need to move on and do other things besides writing proposals that won't get funded. So.
Exactly. Great point.
Right. We had several questions about where people can find information or links or just general information on how to apply to SBIR. So directed kind of at all of us. I can start this off, but where's the best place to go? And I guess I want to preface this for all of our participants who are new to the programs. We talk about SBIR and STTR like they're one or two programs, right? But really, it's like 12 different programs, because each agency kind of operates as its own program, and they have different processes, different requirements, things like that. And then even within particular agencies like DoD, there could be different requirements depending on if you're applying to the Navy versus the Air Force. And so it can get really, really confusing really fast. So I'll just talk about resources really quick that we provide and that FAST provides. Through SBA, they award several awards. I believe it's like 22, right, Brittany? FAST awards throughout the country.
24. Soon
24
to be
this
32.
year. Great. Okay, so throughout the country, because I know there's a lot of you from different states, and so there's a pretty good likelihood that there's a FAST site in your state, and if not, we're happy to connect you to the most appropriate support organization in your state. But we are designed, and our programs are designed to provide assistance. And one of the things we're doing, and I encourage you to visit our website, which I think Stephanie posted earlier in the session, but we've got resources broken down by every agency. And so we direct you directly to the agency site, because the agencies always have really great information on their processes. They often have templates and different documents to help with the proposal process. We also direct you to the SBA, SBIR site. They've got training resources and videos, and they've got a really comprehensive amount of training available for every agency, and then everything in between for SBIR. And then on our website, we've developed, based on what we saw with our clients here in New Mexico, a number of different resources like the one Sydney talked about a little bit. So compliance matrices, templates, checklists, things like that, to just make that proposal process a little bit easier. And we also have the YouTube channel, again, that Sydney mentioned, with lots of videos. I always preface this by saying they are dry. They are not the most exciting videos. I wouldn't watch them right before you go to sleep. But if you're trying to learn about the SBIR process, they're really informative, and they really kind of break down the different steps and things you need to know. In terms of, and maybe Brittany, you can speak to this, for learning about SBIR opportunities and agency announcements, things like that. I think events like the conferences and road tours are really great kind of outreach events that help promote that, right?
Yes. So especially if you're coming at it early, where you're still looking across that slate, like Dana said, when we would do the road tours, we would have all the agencies give these reverse pitches and try to really succinctly talk about their programs and how to engage. All these things we're talking about now, the topics. And so last year, I'm actually trying to get this link here. We have a video kind of compilation of all these folks. Now, some of the details may have changed. This is about a year now, but at least to give you that idea. At sbir.gov, I think we try to be pretty, realistic in that we've put a lot of resources there in terms of the tutorials, and Dana's mentioned, but it's definitely not perfect. So I don't know. I would definitely say there's not a one-stop shop everywhere. So sbir.gov is going to be a really good hub. Once you have partners, like especially if you're in New Mexico, but I see some other states here too, and there's a lot of partners from around the country that are trying to do a good job at bringing things together, but also following the agencies, those newsletters like Dana mentioned. And then now for our team, we have a monthly newsletter too. So, I think it's like that balance, and almost with anything that you're involved with, right, where you want to be exposed and get enough information, but not be so overwhelmed it starts to be, diluted and hard to access. Also, since I have the bike here real quick, I wanted to just address, I started to write Amethyst back in the chat about her crowdfunding question, but I thought I would just speak to it real quick, because crowdfunding isn't going to be a disqualifier, overall, but I think there are other elements that could be related to it that might. And so that's the kind of thing that you'd want to talk with, whoever you're working with at DOE or NSF, and make sure that anything that's been disclosed or worked on kind of through that process, how that might impact your proposal and the strength of what you're putting in.
Great, thanks, Brittany. And kind of along those lines, we had another couple of questions on advantages of being a women-owned business in SBIR. And so I don't know, maybe Eileen or Brittany, if you could touch on this, but is there any competitive advantage to being a women-owned business when you're going through the application process? Or are there incentives for being a women-owned business?
Well, there's not a set aside. So there are people who, especially if they're used to kind of hearing about women-owned business certification in like the general contracting realm, or they hear about this push, like for the legislation in SBIR, it's kind of one of the pillars in the reauthorization where the agencies are basically directed to try to increase participation from women and socially economically disadvantaged groups. And so it's not something though that translates directly to a certain percentage. And I'm curious if anyone has opinions to share here. It's a safe space. But I've heard a lot of women awardees talk about how they were glad. I mean, obviously they made it through, so they already had reached that point. But they were glad there wasn't a set aside because then it's not, there's no question about how their technology was funded or if they were in like a certain quota. So that's definitely an interesting conversation to have. But on the part about the programs, yes, I mean, like what Eileen talked about, what some of the other programs are doing to try to encourage, and some are, it's not even a direct program funding proposal, development, but it could be the way that they're working in partnership with different kinds of organizations, associations. They're really investing more in kind of a pipeline approach, or even tracking some of that outreach over time. I know agencies that are really tight on their people and their budget for these things. And so they will only do things if it's going to, have a good chance to impact the number of proposals that receive from women, for instance. And so it is, I think it's kind of like all across the board. And in our team, as we've grown the last couple of years, trying to get back to a stronger position, we're trying to look at that and coordinate and help, where there are places where it makes sense, for one kind of representative there, or at least to be that voice. And that's part of the reason why we even did that study, was there wasn't a lot of data. And so people had a really hard time understanding what's going on and how it's different across the board. So it's led to some really important, difficult conversations on our end, but I mean, that's why we do what we do, is we really want to see, positive change in this area.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Brittany. Before we break for the Q&A, Sydney, can you talk just a little bit more? I know this was your first time going through it, and that's why we wanted to invite you, because it was fresh and you provide a really great perspective. I know you're still waiting to hear back, but do you think you're going to apply for more awards? What are you going to do maybe differently based on what you learned from this last proposal process that you'll take into the next proposal if you apply again?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely apply again. And when I was thinking through, which of the programs to apply for, which agency to apply for, there were a couple that seemed like they could fit. Obviously, it's an energy technology, and so like DOE makes sense. ARPA-E, which is the Advanced Research Projects Energy. I forgot a letter in there, but they have an open funding call right now that I'm thinking about applying for. I think the biggest thing was just being forced to go through the growing pains of thinking about these questions and answering them, because you really have to have a good idea of what the research you need to do is. And so I had gone in with kind of this vague idea. So my idea is for these second life electric vehicle batteries, to sort of rent them to people to provide energy storage as a service and monitor them in operation and then replace them at the end of life. And I was like, well, we'll make software to do that, which is great. But that's not a research question, right? So I really having to drill down and answer that question of like, what metrics are we going to test for? How are we going to build the model? What's the algorithm we're going to use? Like really deep research questions. And because I haven't been a scientist in a really long time, it required me to read technical papers again, which is hard. And I was glad that I had the folks from NMSU there kind of to support me through that. But I think I'll have I think things will be much smoother for me next time. Like even things, I remember when I was doing the budget and it was late. I mean, not actually late, but late for me. I go to bed really early. And it was asking these questions about fringe rates. And I was like, fringe rates? What is a fringe rate? Can't do this. Like I'm way out of my depth. And then I actually watched one of the videos on the NMSU YouTube channel and it answered my question. So it was fine. I made it past that. But just kind of sort of basic business and grant questions that I just haven't interacted with because I haven't. Getting those questions answered, I think will really sort of streamline the future process. And I'm also just interested to see the responses. So one nice thing that Dell and Dana told me was if your proposal's rejected, they'll respond and give you kind of feedback, and so you can apply again. And so I'm interested to see, you know, where is their feedback, where are there areas of you know, strengths and weaknesses that I should be addressing. And so one thing that I did recently was I participated in Arrowhead at a pitch competition, and it was the first time I'd ever done that. And so it was really helpful to just present this idea to a bunch of people who had never heard it before, and have them be like, yeah, but what about this thing? You know, and sort of think about where are their holes, where are there things that I haven't really considered. And a lot of that came out of my customer interviews, but also just, you know, having someone with fresh eyes, including reviewers who are really knowledgeable in these areas, look at it, I think will be really helpful as I prepare a future SBIR and STTR proposals, which I'm hoping to do, because need that non-dilutive funding.
Right. It's a great source of funding. Great. Thank you, Sydney. Patricia, really quick before you have to jump off, do you have any last tips or tricks?
Thanks, Dana, and thanks everyone. What an awesome group. I just love women coffee groups. So we should do this again. Tagging off of what Sydney was saying, you know, I grew up in the Department of Defense contracting sector because I wanted to be around airplanes and it was fun. And that's one of the challenges in DoD is that you're working, and they're addressing that. They're trying, and Brittany probably knows a lot about that. But there's a sophisticated business development, program management, defense culture out there, and they do exactly that. They throw things in just to get a chance to talk to the customer, and they you know, they call them lost leaders, right? It's like, okay, I'll spend this effort, but they're proposal machines, you know, and they can do that stuff. So bringing women into the fold and learning those same things and practicing those things that make sense. I'm not advocating loss. I don't advocate throwing something in just to, you know, get a negative response. But if you do, it's a perfect opportunity to engage. And I guess I emphasize engagement with the agency and the customer as much as possible, because you learn and they know you and get to know you. And there's nothing more valuable than that one-on-one relationship. So good work, everybody. And Dana, thank you for letting me join this group today.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. I guess we'll kind of jump into our Q&A. I see a question in the chat. So maybe either Brittany or Eileen, if you could address this. But the question is, do you know if any of these agencies are instituting policies to level the playing field? For example, like making the applications neutral to status, race, sex, etc., or standardizing requirements to help mitigate unconscious bias in the process, etc.
Sure, I can definitely at least respond to some of that. Actually, some of my colleagues follow this more closely because they work with the agencies on exactly what's you know, being collected and then what's reported to us. But I'll give an example I just actually heard NIH talking about last week, and that is at some point, I don't know the exact date, they did remove some of that from parts of the proposal. And so basically what did go to reviewers then was neutral for race or gender. And so they, you know, were really aware of this, and, you know, kind of NIH throughout, beyond SBIR. And so that kind of aligned with some of their larger, you know, agency and the institutes and what they were trying to do. Now, I think for us, maybe this is a little too wonky, but we're, you know, there's you know, we're still trying to collect data on who is applying. And so it's really hard if that's fully taken away to an extent, because then we can't necessarily track where agencies are going and how that's, you know, especially the proposal to award conversion. And so it's a bit of how we're trying to solve that on the back end, but each agency is going to be different. They have a set number of things that are required, and that's in the policy directive, and that's directly from legislation. So it's not any of our wishes. We get to opine at times, but then agencies do have a bit of a difference in how they, and then even the review process. If you've heard kind of the bits from agencies on who's reviewing, it's going to vary quite a bit from, you know, full external, you know, expert reviewers to full internal expert reviewers, and how those panels work. And so most of that, though, is you can find out who is reviewing, right? So you're not the first person to ask that question. And so you can kind of dive into, I mean, obviously we have Eileen here, but if it's another agency too, if you are starting to have questions, look into, who is going to be reviewing my proposal. And I mean, that's a question, just like Sydney was saying, when you're trying to figure out how you phrase things, especially if you come from a more technical background or come from a more commercial background. So it's kind of part of that process, but I just encourage people to kind of try to get some insights out of that as well.
Great, thanks, Brittany.
I'll just say, and I guess Brittany touched on a lot of this, we haven't, to my knowledge, considered the whole idea of making the application process blind to the demographics. And it's an interesting concept to me. It's a new concept to me. Our office is, our practices on diversity are really kind of focused right now on awareness, support in terms of application assistance and outreach. And awareness really is, as Brittany says, we're really just starting to track the historical trends of women applicants and women awardees and minority-owned and socially, economically disadvantaged businesses as well too. So current practices, like I said, are really awareness, making the program managers aware of our statistics. How are we doing with women awardees? So tracking the statistics and sort of publicizing them within the department. This is how we're doing, that type of thing. So that's kind of generally how we are working on our improving our diversity of the awardees.
You mind if I pipe in just for a second?
Yeah.
To follow up on that, because that was my question. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if you guys are aware of like all of the research on unconscious bias, the Stanford, all the studies and all of that. So I just wanted to make sure that is in your guys' mind, for potentially, mitigating some of those things in your respective organizations. Because I think a lot of times, like I think a lot of times the people who are looking at these things think that they're not biased. And I think that's the biggest problem. I mean, this is probably one of the issues closest to my heart, and I know that I'm biased when I, read through people's resumes and things like that when we're hiring people. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was on people's minds.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I do know that some folks at some of the agencies are very well versed in a lot of that research. I can't speak across the board just because it is a very large community, and so I haven't talked to everyone about that, but it has come up enough where even on our program manager meetings and in the past, SBA kind of brings together all the agencies. It has been a topic of discussion. So I'd say we're headed in a better direction, at least, being able to define some of that. And also, I think you had a question about if it's worked or not. And, I don't know exactly what Stephanie reported on from NIH SBIR, but I can see if I can find out, and I can even connect her with Eileen. Eileen, if you want to see about how they did that at their program, and we can get if there's any follow-up answers back to Dana to kind of share with the group.
Yeah, be happy to. Great, and I think we have time for one or two more. I saw Ian asked a question, and Ian, if you want to unmute yourself, are you talking more about SBIR? Because with STTR, obviously there's a requirement for research institutions to be part of the proposal package. So I'm going to assume it's SBIR, but the question is, what are the speaker's opinions on the use of subcontractors or research institutions as part of a proposal? If I know Brittany or Eileen, if you want to speak to that.
Eileen might have a better answer than I do, but I think in a general sense, it's not really the question of is a subcontractor or another institution going to hurt by virtue of adding on that kind of relationship. It's more of what's going to make your team stronger and how you're going to better able to express this competence to do the research. And so often, I don't see many teams that can do it without some kind of arrangement, but it's technology dependent, it's very team dependent. And so I think it's better to approach like what's going to be the stronger arrangement, because it can vary anywhere from, I know a young kind of applicant out of Oklahoma who was really, strong in AR, VR, and was looking at applying, and they were applying for DoD, but there was a topic that was perfect for AR, VR, but it had, focus on training folks that were going to work in a submarine, obviously before they would get on a submarine. And so they didn't have any submarine experience. And so we actually had a partner similar to Dana, our Oklahoma FAST partners. We had some really strong contacts in this, and they were able to find someone who ended up being, a subcontractor. They lent their submarine experience and tailored well. And, I guess the long story short is, their first attempt at a Navy SBIR, and they were successful. So.
Yeah, and I think what Brittany said was perfect. And I just want to remind the group that you are the person writing the proposal, and you need to decide how you can make your research project. And phase one is, of course, a feasibility study of your idea and how you can make your proposal as strong as possible. And if you need sort of experiments done at a local university or a national lab in order to prove your concept, then that's going to be a stronger proposal. So you're kind of in the driver in this case. We don't look necessarily favorably or unfavorably on what your mix of your team is, but you wanted your team to be as strong as possible in order for you to conduct your feasibility study, which is the purpose of the phase one proposal.
Right. And maybe Sydney, I was going to say, you just partnered with the research institution. So how was that? Was it?
It was great. It was good. It went really well. And it was when I knew I needed to partner with a research institution. Like I just didn't have the setup to be able to do the data collection that I needed. And I ended up doing an STTR rather than an SBIR, because in an STTR, the research institution can do more of the work. So I'm lucky I live in Albuquerque, and so Sandia is right up the road from me, and there's a lot of technical expertise there that I had thought about maybe partnering with. I think one of the issues that I had with partnering with a national lab is their overhead rate is much higher than I saw at NMSU, and so my money wouldn't have gone as far. And so instead of doing that, I applied for an NMSBA program, technical support, which is again a pretty small pot of money, but allowed me to at least start the relationship building, and they're doing a small kind of research focused project for me that will contribute to the work that I have applied for in the NSF STTR. But I just knew I'm a scientist, but I'm not the kind of scientist that I needed. And so I knew that I had to find someone. And so I was incredibly lucky that it happened so quickly. I sort of had anticipated that it was going to be a longer and more involved process, but researchers want to do research, right? So it worked well, and I certainly don't think that I could have done the research I proposed without that partnership.
Well, I'm glad it worked out, and it was a very strong proposal. So we got our fingers crossed for you. We were almost out of time. Really quick before we sign off, we have a really great women's conference coming up, and so I wanted Kristen Moorhead, who's kind of spearheading that, to just take a couple of minutes, maybe not a couple of minutes, really briefly give a synopsis of what the conference is and what why people should attend. So Kristen, do you want to talk about it really quick?
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share this information with everyone. I am Kristen Moorhead. I'm part of the Arrowhead team. I oversee many of our community-facing programs, but one of our initiatives that's very near and dear to my heart is our Women's Entrepreneurship Conference called We Mean Business. We have been running it for the last 5 years, featuring women entrepreneurs from across the Southwest region. And we will be hosting it this summer. We're branching out this year. We're kind of changing up the format a little bit. We're doing a 2-day conference that'll be offered bilingual, both in English and Spanish. And we feature women entrepreneurs across the region. And really our aim is to inspire women entrepreneurs to share their stories. We talk about funding, we talk about journey, we talk about leadership development, marketing strategy. Last year we took it virtual because of COVID, and it turned out to be the best thing we could have done for the conference because we can reach so much farther. So we're running it virtual again this year, and it's just a really awesome experience for women to connect with each other, support each other, empower each other, learn from each other. And, you know, I think Sydney's story at the beginning was it's just an indicative story of the journey of most entrepreneurs. They are not trained in business. They are experts in their field, and they're learning from doing it, from getting their hands in and just going. And so that's kind of the stories we share and encourage women to take those chances, get out there and start their businesses. So the link's in the chat. We encourage you to join us. You can learn about the conference, get your tickets. I talked for more than 2 minutes, but thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can contact me directly. And I'll put my email in the chat as well. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. It's a great conference, and it's so exciting that we're able to offer it virtually because it's applicable to entrepreneurs across the country, right? Even though it used to be very regional for us when it was in person, but we're excited to expand. But we're out of time. I'd like to thank everybody again for participating. Thank you so much, Brittany and Sydney and Eileen, for taking some of your morning to sit and chat with us. I hope you all enjoyed your coffee. A reminder for the gift cards, we'll be sending those out today or tomorrow. Because they're codes, sometimes they take a day or two to process, so just watch your email for those. And we will be planning another one of these for the next quarter, so be on the lookout for that. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to any of us. So with that, thank you and have a great rest of your day.